What's up? Welcome to the Chunder Down Under. No, we're not in Australia, although I was just on an Australian show yesterday over with Mike Ryan and TNT. Was it The World News Now or The World Today? I think that was the new show. It used to be TNT Radio, which you guys probably remember. Awesome show. Actually, an awesome network that basically came under fire because the Australian government is anti-free speech. But anyway, glad Mike is back on top and glad to be with you guys today here on Mean Age Daydream, where I am, of course, Brian McWilliams, your beautiful bald host. Now, before we get into the show proper, I want to remind you guys we are doing our Degenerate Gamblers show every week. We've got our league going where people can beat us to win t-shirts and free Lions merch. Of course, we do a show making some football picks, rehashing some funny stories, and sometimes throwing some memes around. We're doing that too. So make sure you go to patreon.com/Lions of Liberty and you can join us for as little as $5. Of course, you also get my morning rants and much more. And if you're on locals, you can join there too. So check us out. That would be great. Okay, so let's get into it today. We've got a situation here where the Attorney General of the United States comes out in the wake of what is an undeniable tragedy, right? And I don't want to talk too much about the Charlie Kirk thing today because I think a lot of people are probably kind of blown out on Charlie. I'll talk briefly about the text messages between Ty Robinson and his trans lover at the end of the show, but we already did a show on politics talking about Charlie. Obviously, John Odermatt did a show Monday, so I don't want to go down that train again until there's something new to talk about. But the fallout from Charlie Kirk's assassination has been that you've been exposed to a lot of people on the left calling for, not to say calling for assassination, let's say hinting that they'd like to see another one happen. And this is something that is overly pronounced on Reddit, which, I tweeted this out. Reddit is just the 4chan of the left, but with far less intelligence, far more hatred, because 4chan, for whatever you might think about 4chan, which, and by the way, I talked about how 4chan is a defender of free speech. Whatever you might think about 4chan, the fact remains that they do have a sense of humor. There is a lot of hateful conduct there and a lot of hateful content, but there's also a lot of the most famous memes you're ever going to see. They come out of 4chan, right? Reddit, on the other hand, is full of people that have zero senses of humor in a lot of these forums, and it's absolutely 100% moderated by ultra leftists. And this has come to bear in the fact that you can't question what a woman is, right? The definition of a woman cannot be questioned. A man can become a woman, etc. on Reddit. That will get you banned. What will not get you banned is openly calling for the assassination of any number of political figures, celebrities, you name it. That's A-okay on Reddit. And it really was interesting. I saw a tweet going around. The one forum that actually stood up and said, we do not want to have anybody here talking about or condoning assassination of their political opponents or celebrating the murder of a man in front of his children. The Lord of the Rings forum. That was the one that stood up, the one to rule them all on Reddit, the one sane thread or Reddit forum was Lord of the Rings that said, we're not going to do this. We're going to ban you if you celebrate Charlie Kirk's death. So good for Lord of the Rings. But you're seeing a lot of people come out there and make these horrible, hideous comments, remarks. I mean, untrue remarks about Kirk, but also essentially saying we condone the violence. And as I'd said before in politics, the issue with this when it comes to speech, it's not a matter of you can't say it. You certainly can say it, but there are going to be repercussions. And during the cancel culture era of when the liberals were in charge and running the show, when it came to cancel culture, when it came to social media policing and all these other things, corporate DEI and all these other, MADD HR departments run amok. Well, they canceled people over having the wrong opinion on a topic that was still up for a strong debate, aka COVID, aka trans issues, aka whatever race issues you might want to get into. These are topics that are still up in debate and are unsettled in our society. I may feel one way about them, aka I might feel a certain way about climate. I might feel a certain way about whether or not children should be, exposed to different hormones and have their bottom surgeries permitted at age 14. But what should not be a question is whether or not you can talk about these things. What is in question and should be condemned, and has been, is celebrating the murder of a political rival, especially a non-violent one, right? This is what people are like, well, you know what? People were celebrating Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden was a madman who went out and intentionally murdered thousands of people. You cannot compare him to a man that is having a discussion with others, with students, with other people, has a show, and is really going through and making a fairly detailed explanation of exactly why he thinks what he thinks, and in a non-hateful fashion. But of course, under the auspices of hate speech, these people will say, well, he deserved it because he was inspiring hate. He was inspiring other people to think this way and ruining our world. This is ridiculous. Point being, it's not the same thing to celebrate the death of a man who is non-violently having discourse and somehow say that the right was embracing cancel culture by demanding that the people who celebrated it have a comeuppance. And the reason why, and I tweeted this out, the reason why is that we have to have a bright red line in our society. If we are going to have a society with Western values, with liberal values, quote unquote, liberal values of discourse, of talking through our problems instead of resorting to violence at all times, well, then you have to have, you have to have the conditions of that society demand that people do not celebrate the open murder of other people they disagree with. We cannot make that an acceptable standard. And that's what these people have been trying to do. The demonization of people that they disagree with, labeling people Nazis, labeling people fascists. I mean, it's not a coincidence that this shooter had anti-fascist written on his bullet casing. It might not have been the one that went through Charlie, but it was certainly in those casings. And that he notoriously had said, this guy's a fascist, I've got to be killed, calling people Hitler. When you do this, you're doing it intentionally. You're doing it to dehumanize your opponents so that they are seen as less than human and thus capable of being killed because they're not on the same moral ground as you. They don't have a soul. I guess similar to the abortion debate, right? If you don't believe in heaven, that this creature has a soul, whether it be somebody you're calling a Nazi or an unborn baby, you don't care about it. Well, then you can murder it, right? That is what the entire impetus of this language is. So I'm sorry, all of you teachers, all of you nurses, all of you baristas that are being fired for being ghouls on social media and tweeting about how happy you are that a man got killed in front of you that you didn't like. Yes, you get a repercussion for that because we have to course correct as a society. We have to have that rule that you're not allowed to foster more violence by celebrating assassinations, because that's what it does. It says, if you say, great, who's next? Which I've seen so many different times. What do you think that's saying? You are clearly cheering on political violence. You're clearly cheering on the next assassination. That cannot be permitted in a civilized society. So yeah, this course correction had to happen. It is not cancel culture to have this happen. And to label it as such is absolutely ridiculous. So let's go back to Pam Bondi, though. Now, Bondi, since she made the remarks that I was going to talk about today, but she since walked it back, Pam Bondi went out there and said that she was going to go after and attack and even saying cuff people. And now these are not her exact words in sequence, by the way. I'm just pulling from different quotes and different things that she's posted, because she posted a long diatribe, then she posted stuff on social media, then she did interviews. So I'm kind of mushing them all together here. But she came out there and said, you know what, we're going to go after these people. If you're going out and saying these hateful things about, Charlie Kirk and others, we will come after you. Now, she also, in a right the same sentence, talks about the fact that you're not allowed to incite violence, and that is a crime. Okay, yes. That's a crime. Direct incitement of violence, direct threats to someone's life, those are crimes. But I'm sorry, Pam, just saying hateful things is not a crime. Calling Charlie Kirk, as much as I might hate it, calling Charlie Kirk a racist or an anti-Semite or whatever it might be that these people are trying to smear him as, is not something that's prosecutable. Hate speech has always existed, was created from the get-go as a way to target people's political enemies. You can pretend and say, oh, no, it came out of a good place because they wanted to hate, stop racial hatred between the sexes and between different races and make sure that people are kind to each other. Okay, number one, that's not how it worked out. Number two, that race hatred goes both ways and every which way. And frankly, was a lot better before we had hate crimes and hate speech policing and all these other things that serve to divide us further as a people. Made people so aware of everything they said and did to make sure that they weren't offending anybody, because God forbid you get a hate speech label slapped on you and the HR department's called, and then you get a police sentencing because you dared to look at somebody the wrong way and they interpreted it differently than you actually meant. This is the slippery slope of hate speech. And you've seen it politicized and used within the judicial system to target people where there's already laws on the books that criminalize stalking, beating, harassment, murder, you name it, they exist. This reminds me of the outrage over people like Rand Paul and Massey opposing a stupid bill that would have made lynching like an extra super crime. It's already a crime to murder somebody. Just because you did it in a certain way doesn't mean it should be extra super punished. Okay? That's what sentencing is for. That's what lengths are for of sentencing. That's what different penalties are for in different states. Maybe it's a death penalty in one, maybe it's not in the other. The point being, when you have hate speech legislation, the way it was applied was to punish people of a specific race, typically white people, not always, typically white people. They would punish people of a specific race who committed a quote unquote crime that violated these hate speech laws. And this could be anything from getting in a fight, and you've seen this before, where somebody gets a fight with another person. It's now labeled a hate crime, and we have zero evidence that it actually was. But now you're levying punishments that can triple the amount of time that this person spends in jail. This is absurd. And the problem with all this, as with anything regarding free speech, hate speech, censorship, is always who defines what hate speech is. Well, I'll tell you who. The government. Which is why hate speech legislation, as much as the right would decry it before, you do see that there were certain factions, including Pam Bondi before she walked it back, including Donald Trump. There are certain factions who are more than happy to trample on free speech in order to follow political gains and punish their enemies or their perceived enemies. And you cannot have a government define what is or is not acceptable speech in any way. I'm an absolutist. So Pam Bondi, this is the silver lining here. This is the white pill. Pam Bondi says these stupid things that are completely unconstitutional and frankly disqualifying for somebody that's an attorney general. If I were the president, when I rule the world, that'll never happen. When I have some sort of influence and I'm able to influence who's the attorney general, I would have fired her on the spot. On the spot. You can't say something that stupid. You can't be that fundamentally misunderstanding of one of the most basic tenets of our republic, which is the freedom of speech. So, as I said, the white pill here, after all these idiot Democrats came out and said, "Oh, the right wing is going after hate speech. They love hate speech now." No, the right wing doesn't, and libertarians don't. Actually, everyone, almost unanimously, except the paid influencers that Donald Trump's got on the payroll and the White House is paying off, Cat Turd and the like, although I haven't seen, maybe Cat Turd came out against it too. The right and the middle and the left all came up and said, no, we're absolutely not going to permit this. Even people on the left, because I've seen some of the left-wingers now who have been transferred over. Their brains have been deprogrammed enough over the past 5 or 6 years, seeing the absurdities of race and hate speech laws and all these other things that are happening in our country. And of course, hate speech is around transgenderism too, right? The amount of censorship around transgenderism that existed on Facebook, on X, still exists on Rumble, on YouTube, absurd. So the people rose up from every direction and said, absolutely fucking not. Walk it back. This is insanity. And you know what? She did. Now she said, at least to Axios, I'm reading an Axios story now. Pam Bondi tells Axios her office is not prosecuting or investigating anyone for alleged hate speech, only for speech, she says, unlawfully incites violence. All right, good. That's fantastic. Because what she had said earlier, as I mentioned, was that she would go after and target people for prosecution that engaged in hate speech. Now, this would have never held up anyway, right? Legally, it wouldn't have held up if you're targeting somebody over hate speech and arresting them over simply speech, right? Not actions, and I'm not to get into the hate crime laws I just told you about. Not talking about somebody getting murdered, and then you find out that they also were speaking mean to them. If you try to get somebody and prosecute them simply on the grounds that they were a nasty, mean person online or a nasty, mean person yelling things, well, it's not going to hold up. But the issue, and I brought this up last night in the show, the issue that happens with all this is that think about what we saw during COVID. Think about what we saw during the Biden censorship push, where people's rights were violated. Their freedom of speech rights were violated. Their freedom or their Fourth Amendment rights were violated. During the COVID era, people were mandated and forced to get vaccines, which violates all sorts of, again, your right to your body, the right to your private property. You had unconstitutional violations, which then go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court goes, you can't do this. What are you, nuts? Well, guess what? It still fucking happened. The Constitution is not some Iron Man suit of armor that you can walk around in and protects you all the time. I got bad news for you guys. It's an old piece of paper, and the way our system works, especially with executive powers, especially with the way in which these political bodies operate and have so much power autonomously before anybody can actually check them, means that you can get a hell of a lot of violations in there. You can trample a hell of a lot of quote unquote rights before anybody is going to blink an eye. I mean, it takes months before it even can be get filed. Months after that until the Supreme Court reads it. Months after that until they come to a decision on it. So good luck. After they arrest you, kick down your door, UK style, and arrest you for speech. And then 2 years later, after you're rotting in prison, they go, you know what? We couldn't do that. Sorry, buddy. High five. Good game. Pat you on the ass. Send you back out to play. So it's interesting timing, by the way. We're talking about free speech. We're talking about hate speech. We're talking about the government using this as a tool, a cudgel to go after people, political enemies that violate the state's definition of what is hateful. And look, to be clear, as I said earlier, I agree that the remarks that people are saying about Charlie Kirk are hateful, but you're still allowed to say them. What's interesting to me is that Donald Trump just went over this week to meet with Keir Starmer, the totalitarian monster who is destroying his country, violating every promise that he made, and minimalizing the cares and honest to God, I mean, the difficulties in living that everyday British people are encountering in the wake of massive migration. Billions and billions of dollars are spent on immigrations and refugees that are coming in on these little boats from African nations. Again, all male, all fighting age, all coming in at once. And then the fact that these people are, not only engaging in rape gangs, grooming gangs, violent, drug and criminal gangs, but they're also, on top of all the issues of a safe society, are also being given free housing, free food, free phones, taking up hotels, taking up private residences. I've seen numerous stories now. I haven't personally validated each of these stories, but I'm seeing reported, Daily Mail and things like that, of people that have been kicked out of their apartments, Brits, in order to put in a migrant family. I mean, this is psychotic on the next level. So what do the Brits do? Well, they can't fight back because they don't have any fucking guns. So they go out in the streets and they protest. There was a march that the BBC first said was 110,000 people. Of course, it was actually several million people. And that was very obvious to see from the videos and the aerial footage that was provided. And was later corrected, by the way, by the government itself. Was like, well, there were millions there. And then what you get out of these pieces of shit is that they want to label it as a anti-establishment far-right riot in which many arrests were made. I think there were 17 arrests. And I've seen a lot of stats comparing this to a carnival festival in which all the refugees and, immigrants had taken part in a different part of London. And there were 587 arrests. Again, this is, battery of police officers, all sorts of stuff. 587. But that was a celebration of multiculturalism. And this peaceful, not fiery, but peaceful march with 17 arrests, mostly probably instigated by the police themselves or the bobbies or Antifa, gets labeled as the violent far-right motion. Now, I didn't realize that there were 3 million far-right Brits, but that goes to show you the definition of language and why the government cannot be permitted to control language. Because as you see, they will weaponize it against you at any point and at any whim to forward the narrative, to label you as an enemy of the state, to try to poison your neighbors against you. So you're seeing this, right? This massive march, and you're seeing the boiling point might be coming for England. And in the midst of this, Donald Trump flies over to the UK. His idiot attorney general makes these remarks about hate speech and how they're going to come after you and attack you for hate speech comments as you're going to the UK, where the fucking authoritarians are arresting their own citizens for complaining about the thing that you talk about all the time, Donald Trump. In the UK, you cannot complain about immigration or they will arrest you. You can't say anything shitty about the people coming over or they will arrest you. And your attorney general puts out a statement essentially saying, yeah, we agree with that. Are you fucking nuts? I mean, the question is it going to be a wake-up call that Donald Trump goes over there and sees all these millions of people marching in the streets against the censorship, against the immigration, and go, you know what? Okay, we can't have censorship, and we need to continue to crack down on immigration problems. Because look at what's happening in Europe, and look at what's happening in the United States. Now, the U.S. isn't as bad, by the way. Europe, though, my God. Is he going to go look at things and go, you know what? Okay, I got to be careful here, because if I start cracking down on free speech, they're not 3 million unarmed, pasty pale people that are going to be taking the streets. It is millions upon millions of very well armed Americans that will take to the streets. So hopefully it's a wake up call rather than a confirmation for Donald Trump. All right. Speaking of wake-up calls, so low IQ Hawaiian idiot Mazie Hirono had a fantastic exchange with Kash Patel. By the way, Kash Patel also just obliterated Chuck Schumer. I don't have the video of that pulled up, but it was hilarious, the exchange between Kash and Chuck, where Kash Patel just ripped into him, saying that he's been proven grossly to be a liar on January 6th and Russiagate, and he's a buffoon. Oh, love it. If nothing else, Kash Patel being in that position is worth it just for that. Get some water real quick. But this was also a fantastic exchange. This is between Kash Patel and Mazie Hirono, senator out of Hawaii, who keeps getting elected despite the fact that she, as I mentioned, has to be one of the lowest IQ individuals I've ever seen. Maxine Waters level dumb. And they're talking about Mazie Hirono is being upset because Kash Patel wants a different standard for, wants women to have to adhere to the male standard for strength and physical testing. Now, this is something I talked about as well in the Army, how it was absurd that they were lowering strength and endurance limits for joining the Army and joining special forces. Because if you think about it practically, and Kash Patel will make this point as well in regards to the FBI. If you're out in a mission, if you're you're lugging machine guns and ammo and extra food and rations and clothes and medikits and whatever, you're lugging that around in a military unit, and one of your unit can't hack it and is slowing you all down. That is an operational risk. Similarly, you'll recall the Vietnam War, guys, or any of the world wars, where you have mines or you have punji pits with bamboo spikes sticking up that have crap smeared on them. The whole idea is that you step on a mine and it blows your foot off, and now your unit is stuck with you, and it slows the entire thing down. mines weren't always about killing guys. It's also about just maiming and slowing. Same thing with these punji pits. You step in a punji pit in Vietnam, a spike goes through your leg, gets infected. The entire unit is now handicapped with you. So if you have a woman who is not able to keep up, isn't able to carry as much, has to slow everybody down, that's an operational risk for the entire unit. It's practical logic, and it's ridiculous to say that you should lower the standards for everybody. So similarly, let me play this video from old Cashy here, because I think you'll enjoy this immensely. And cue it up.
Move on to my, you've been asked some questions about changes to your hiring standard, and including college degrees and possibly the age. But, one question I had is,
take your time, dummy.
That you are now requiring applicants to be able to do a certain kind of pull-ups, which a lot of women cannot because of physiological differences. Are you requiring these kinds of pull-ups?
Now, I'll pause it real quick there, because as many other people pointed out, and I noticed immediately too, I'm sorry, did you just say the physiological differences between a man and a woman? Oh, good. So now we're admitting that there is a massive strength difference between men and women. Now, this same woman, I guarantee you, I can find videos of it, of her saying that trans men should be allowed to compete in women's sports. So there's no difference. These people know they're fucking liars. They know it. They just capitulated, and then they refused to walk it back forever. And now, finally, cowards like Malcolm Gladwell are coming out and being like, okay, yeah, it's ridiculous. I knew it all along. I just didn't want to get canceled. That's real cancel culture, dummies. Saying something true that then gets you fired or gets you not able to be get a new job or get a promotion. That's cancel culture jerk-offs. Not saying that somebody should die and then having a repercussion for it. All right, keep going, Hirono.
We are requiring a physical program at BFTC at Quantico because FBI agents carrying guns in the field have to chase down bad guys and do really hard work. The physical fitness standards of those agents.
So are you requiring these kinds of pull-ups?
We are requiring everybody to pass the 1811 standards at BFTC. If you want to chase down a bad guy and put him in handcuffs, you better be able to do a pull-up.
Goddamn right. And I love how all these horrible, again, low IQ people, they love to ask a question that they're clearly wrong on, and when they start to get their asses handed to them, they don't want to let you finish. You see her, she tried to talk over him 18 times there as he's giving her the completely logical answer of, if you're chasing down a bad guy who's going to be big and strong, you need to be strong. Why is this controversial? Why is this imbecile even bringing this up as if it's a controversy, as if anything he said didn't make complete and total sense? And yet she doesn't even want to let him finish because she's got something else that she needs to slam in there to try to get him. Sorry, baby. Fuck around and find out. You brought it up. Now you're a jerk off. And what's funny too is that, Chef Andrew Gruel, who's a good follow, he had said, now pull-ups are fascist. Yeah, exactly. It's fascist to expect the bare minimum of somebody that's going into law enforcement and will at some point have to use those skills when you're wrestling with bad guys who, you know what? Hate to tell you, Maisie Hirono, they usually just don't go willingly. They're going to want to put up a fight. It's kind of one of those things. I don't know if you've seen any of the Batman movies, but the bad guys, they usually fight back. Okay, last thing, guys. Oop, bump my mic. Last thing I just want to talk about is, I'm not going to go through all the specific text because I just want to make this a quick take. But, Ty Robinson, who, yes, I do believe is the shooter, to make it clear. I know there's been some people talking about, well, Israel may have killed Charlie Kirk because they were trying to buy him off, and now he's kind of questioning Israel. Look, that's all valid to bring up and say, okay, that could be a possibility. But this, to me, seems like a pretty cut and dry case of, there's a kid, the kid is trans, or at least dating a trans, He's a very online, quote, online Reddit kid, right, per his neighbor. Now, what that translates to me is that this is a socially awkward kid who was a loner. This is a socially awkward kid who probably has some sort of autism and then has been, radicalized by online and combined with media and in academics. And this is, of course, the way that so many have been radicalized. When you see the text messages going back and forth between him and his lover, the one thing I could say does make sense to me is that these two might be, and actually I was talking to my wife Sandy about this today. She was voicing the same thing. These text messages that were turned over to the police certainly could be them trying to cover the ass for the trans lover, right? Because maybe they planned it together and they want to make sure that only one of them is going to go to jail. Fine, right? I get that. It could be because they are written kind of the way, especially Ty Robinson's are written, are very robotic. But like we're saying, I think this is a kid who has autism. This is what people with autism sound like often. Let's not forget that people with autism are also very, very high when it comes to percentages of people that either identify as trans or get locked into this trans world. So, as I mentioned on politics, I'll reiterate it here in case you guys didn't hear it. We have to look at this. And again, I believe this is the shooter because there is a pattern here, a distinct pattern here. We have to look at this and go, okay, you're going to see, I think, more trans shooters before this ends. And I hate everything about it. I think it's despicable. I think it's horrible, but you have to look at how this specific genre of mass shooter was created. And that to me comes down to, number one, 100% the fault of the left. Sorry, guys, 100% the fault of the left. When you have a top-down affirmative care model when it comes to transgenderism, when you have a affirmative mandate from your medical associations, your psychiatric associations, your schools, through to, the parents who are now pressured through media, through friend groups, through social media to affirm. If you don't affirm, you're a monster. If you don't affirm, your child will commit suicide. Well, it looks like if you do affirm, your child might commit murder. But the point is, I don't want to say that, there are completely legitimate people who are transgender. And I do think, yes, it is a mental illness. Now, that doesn't mean that it's a mental illness that makes it violent or that makes it criminal or that makes it something that should be, pushed to the outsides of society and ignored and stoned. I don't think that at all. I think that it's something where if this is your mental illness, then the treatment for that mental illness very well can be to live your life as a woman or live your life as a man. And maybe you get surgery, right? And these are things that we can and did accept. It should not be to the point where we're rearranging society over it, which is what had been happening. But what ended up really causing the problem here was that there are so many different mental illnesses that were not, emphasize, not transgenderism. Like bipolar disorder, like schizophrenia, like autism, like severe depression, like social or behavioral anxiety and issues, antisocial, whatever disorder. The problem was that because of the top-down affirmative model and because these people were lazy and this is all the lawsuits, by the way, that are coming out from people that are detransitioning against Kaiser Permanente and others. They affirmed the care, they prescribed the solution and the cure, which is you're trans, so we're going to keep transing you up, instead of solving or curing the root issue, which was that autism, that bipolarism, that whatever it was, and treating it for what it actually is. I'm not saying you can cure those things, but treating them as what they were. The mental illness is what they were. Instead, you had a top-down affirmative care balm applied to all these things, which didn't solve the fucking problem and radicalize these people in the interim. That is what has happened. And again, if you see these transgender people that are detransitioning now, they will tell you for a fact that is what happened to them. They turned out to go the other way. Some of these people, because of the underlying mental illnesses they have, which have been diagnosed as transgenderism, their problems didn't get solved. And now you are seeing the fallout from that. It's just one man's take, but I think I'm on the right track with it. Okay, guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lions of Liberty Network podcast. We have 5 awesome shows. We've got 4 days a week with different hosts, and then our politics show, which is every other week. Of course, as I mentioned, you can get it on the Patreon. Go patreon.com/Lions of Liberty for all of our bonus content, or lionsofliberty.locals.com. Otherwise, have a great rest of your week. Keep your head up. Things will get better. And from me, from the Lions of Liberty Network, from Mean Age Daydream, keep those electric eyes on me, babe. Keep that ray gun to my head. Talk to you later.